Do you have a practice of, are we looking mostly at each other? Are we looking at the camera?
I think it makes sense to mostly talk to each other.
Okay.
If you want to make a point to the camera, I think that is totally
Break the
appropriate.
fourth wall a little
Yeah,
bit.
break the fourth wall, exactly. We're going to start that over again.
This is me too. Usually though, just in my living room with my phone like this.
Welcome to Ungerrymander America, a show about the system. My name is Zane Gustafson. I'm your host, and I am so excited to have a guest today, Hannah Sabio-Howell, who is running for state senate in my district in Washington, the 43rd. The theme of today's show is challenging the status quo. And, you know, a common line in American politics, as far as I can remember, going back to Obama, is people being upset at the status quo and wanting change. And, you know, I think there's a strong case to be made that every president since Obama has been a change candidate. Obama was obviously hope and change. Donald Trump was very much a change candidate in 2016. Biden was a change candidate from the chaos of Trump.
Change from the change.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then Trump in 2024, obviously another change candidate. So here in Washington State, the Democratic Party has controlled both chambers of the state legislature since 2018 and has controlled the governor's mansion since 1985. I think that's the longest in the country. I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure. And Hannah, you are running in the 43rd district, and your opponent is the Senate Majority Leader, Jamie Peterson, who has been in office since 2006. Oh, there's a plan. And I was doing some research before this, and I found out, shockingly, he has never faced a competitive challenge in 20 years.
That's right.
And so thank you for coming on the show. And let's just start with the basic. Hannah, what is your story? Why are you running for Senate, and why are you challenging Senator Peterson?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I want to start with what I think is possible in Washington State. That I think Washington State has so much potential to be the best place in the country for working people to build good lives if it's affordable. That's a big if, because it's not right now. And I would say it's not because of status quo leadership, something we'll dig into, that has nibbled around the edges of solutions and waited to take action once crisis has forced their hand. And in Washington State, we can do so much more than that. I think we can reduce rent and put homeownership within reach meaningfully by building more housing more quickly. I think that we can absolutely establish transformative programs that lift families out of struggle, like universal childcare. And we know that this type of safety net is not possible without right-sizing a tax code that right now asks more of you and me and you than Amazon and Microsoft and McDonald's, the wealthiest corporations here in not only our state, but in human history. And if we have the political courage to structurally transform a regressive tax code, to tax the ultra wealthy and relieve costs that are currently falling to working families, I think Washington State could be so much more than it is. And that's going to happen only if we're standing up to corporate interests. You know, I'm really proud to be the only campaign in this race not taking a dime of corporate PAC money. And we are doing that as a part of signaling that this is a campaign that works for you. We are campaigning the way we would govern by saying we are fighting for working people's interests, not for corporate interests, not for the ultra wealthy. And it's part of why I'm really proud to be supported by Representative Sean Scott, a seatmate in this district, Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink, someone who won a greater portion of the vote share in Seattle than has ever been won by a city elected. And I'll button this up by saying that our campaign is shaped by the labor movement. I come out of organizing alongside underpaid workers to raise wages and labor standards in disenfranchised industries, standing up to corporate interests to do so. And I also come out of the state legislature. I used to work at the state senate as a comm specialist. I used to work in the House as a legislative aide. Constituent services, fighting for policy that works for working people, staffing lawmakers who are working to buck the status quo, that is what shapes who I am and what shapes this campaign.
You said you worked in the legislature for a little bit. I know you were an intern in the legislature. I was also an intern in the legislature.
Yeah.
Kind of funny, I was an intern for your opponent, for Jamie Peterson. And I think, just to play devil's advocate, I don't know if he would describe himself as part of the status quo. I think that he would point to the Millionaires Tax and some of the other, he would argue, transformational legislation that's been passed in the past decade as not being status quo. I'll let him make that case on the show another time. But let's go, like, what is your background? How did you get to this point?
Well, first I want to address that point and just say that there's a difference between reactionary leadership and visionary leadership.
Okay.
I think what we have seen, when I say status quo leadership, I'm talking about lawmaking, an approach to governing that has reacted, that has waited until, for example, a budget crisis before advancing something as historic as the Millionaires Tax, that has waited for polling to indicate that that's popular before moving forward with a tax on the ultra wealthy. And I think what that has gotten us is the crisis of affordability that we're unprepared to deal with, especially as exacerbated by the Trump regime. But to more directly answer your question, you know, the people I got to intern for included State Senator Rebecca Saldana, who has dual endorsed our campaign, and also the Senate Democratic Caucus policy staff. So I was getting to work on a range of issues, not just as an intern, but then also in my full-time capacities. And that included staffing the prime sponsor of the capital gains tax. That included working with lawmakers to end sub-minimum wages for disabled workers, to expand healthcare access, especially for postpartum care for new parents. The suite of issues that we got to work on really shape our eagerness to bring the 43rd District's visionary leadership to Olympia. I think that Senator Peterson is someone who I would be extremely proud to take the baton from, but it is time to pass the baton. That after 20 years, the cost of housing has doubled. The access to opportunity for working people feels further and further out of reach. Things feel more expensive even as our social services have eroded. And I think it's time for a change, for a new generation of leadership that is going to treat policymaking like it's something we build together instead of something that happens to us.
Interesting. I really find your point about reactionary leadership versus visionary leadership, that's fairly interesting to me. What would you say is your vision for Washington State, for the 43rd, for Seattle? This is I think it's the most dense district in the state, is the 43rd district, which we are currently sitting in. And you listed a bunch of things, but like, what is your vision, maybe in 3 sentences?
Oh, well, I think the boldest, most visionary ideas and leadership could be coming out of this bold visionary district, and that there is no district that better empowers its lawmakers to be forward thinking. So I think about things like, well, we'll get into it, but I think about things like democracy reform, saying things like, we could have a full-time state legislature, we could have a statewide democracy voucher program, we could do these bigger, bolder things that other lawmakers have been reticent to say.
Wait, can I jump in on there?
Please.
So, full-time legislature, expand on that. What does that mean?
That would ultimately be a more democratic form of governing in this state. It would mean that more people can access both, representing their communities as lawmakers, but also engaging with Olympia as constituents.
Because currently we do not have a full-time legislature.
Correct.
So the legislature is out of session right now, and it is in session for 3 months in a long session and then 2 months in a short session. And so outside of that time, our legislators are back in their communities doing whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So this part-time state legislature means that we are unable to react to a federal government that is completely out of control, because there are, like you said, 8 months out of the year, 8 to 9 months out of the year, when state lawmakers here in Washington aren't in session. We can't respond to federal overreach until January of 2027. And
Yeah.
so when I say things like we could have a full-time state legislature, I don't present that as a near-term solution, because of course it's not. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, including building a supermajority of Democrats in Olympia. But I name that as something that I think the lawmakers from districts as progressive as ours could be uplifting.
Interesting. Right. So let's talk about, you've alluded to the national turmoil, let's say. I don't really want to get into all that in this conversation, but it is the elephant in the room. One of the things, obviously the name of this show is Ungerrymander America. Gerrymandering is my pet issue, and how to resolve gerrymandering, in my opinion, is proportional ranked choice voting.
Completely agree.
I'm going to pop up a little graphic. I'm going to show it to you now. I redrew Washington's map as a hyper gerrymandered 10-0 district, a 10-0 map for the Democrats. And I'm not proposing that we do this necessarily. I'm just illustrating it as you could do this. And in this, in this one, you can see here, you've basically got slivers of Seattle spiraling out into every corner of the state. And every single one of these districts is, I think, at least a 53 or 54% Democrat majority. Which is, this is bad for the country. I want to reiterate that. But it is a thing that we're seeing in Texas and Florida and Alabama and Louisiana, also in California. The Virginia one got struck down. So what is your view on the gerrymandering war, as people are calling it?
Well, I agree with you that a race to the bottom is bad. And it's the position that Republican-controlled state legislatures across the South have put states like ours in, as they have systematically, well, frantically and also systematically, gerrymandered away majority Black, majority Democrat districts in those parts of the country. So, I mean, I think that if Washington State, let's say, if Washington State had right now the ability to gerrymander ourselves 1 or 2 more Democratic congressional seats, we should do it and commit to fighting for proportional representation as our system, multi-member districts, knowing that that is so much more fair and democratic across ideological spectrums and
across the entire state. Yeah. So I'm thrilled to hear that. That's awesome. So there was a democracy bill in the state legislature that died at some point in the process. I don't remember exactly when. But it was a ranked choice voting bill, and it was a local options bill. One of the things that it did not do was it did not address the election of the state legislators themselves to make it a proportional ranked choice voting system, which I've argued in my book and in other videos here that would create the conditions for multi-party democracy. Is that something that you would be in favor of, like, supporting or pushing for as kind of like a visionary leadership?
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. I think you're right that the local options bill, I think now called the Washington Voices Act, is hitting roadblocks that it will continue to hit, especially if we expand it in that way. So I think I would say I'm really, really supportive both of the Washington Voices Act and applying RCV to state level elections as well. I think they may need to be separate so that we can achieve the first thing first, and then expand it and strengthen it with an expansion of RCV across different types of elections. But yes, I'm very supportive of that.
When you say roadblocks, what do you mean?
Well, I think that per our earlier conversation, the leadership that approaches government by nibbling around the edges of solutions have been reticent to move RCV forward, have not been willing to commit to that. I know that there are also there is criticism or opposition from the Secretary of State's office to RCV in particular.
Yes.
And so that is credit where credit's due. That is somewhat outside of the state legislature's hands, but I think this is again part of what we could be doing from the 43rd district is identifying, naming the obstacles, and committing to moving visionary pro-democracy policy like RCV.
Shifting a little bit, this is kind of more of a personal question, but like, what do you uniquely offer? You, Hannah Sabio-Howell, uniquely offer the 43rd in Washington State as a legislator.
Yeah, I think that, having mentioned that I come out of organizing, I think organizers in government have proven to be incredibly effective at bringing previously disenfranchised or marginalized people into policymaking to shape outcomes that are supposed to serve us. I think if we're looking at, the shoulders of the giants upon which our campaign stands, we have people like Representative Sean Scott, Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink, Senator Rebecca Saldana, and I'm thinking too about a broader movement, including all of the organizing that House Our Neighbors did to win not only social housing, a previously visionary or lofty sounding idea, that has been made real thanks to organizing. Even reaching back as far back as the Fight for 15 over 10 years ago. I come out of the same movement that was built by a cross-sector, multiracial movement of workers saying, we deserve better and we're going to redefine what economic common sense means. And that's the type of, again, orientation to policy making that I think organizers broadly bring. I don't think any one lawmaker or any one candidate is indispensable, so I won't say that of myself either, but I think that that's what we offer as someone who comes out of organizing, as someone who is a renter, a queer woman of color who is embedded in the district in the sense that I share the lived experience of the majority of our district. I think that's part of what a new generation of leadership can offer.
There's no you alone can fix this.
Correct. There's definitely no I alone can fix this.
Right, right. No, that is refreshing. In a democracy, that is, I think, a dangerous thing to say. Well, but let's talk about that. So, on the policy-making perspective, I think we'll let that chopper. Yeah. I love recording outside, but there are sometimes conditions. Right. We're gonna start. We're gonna redo that.
It's coming.
Yeah.
This is so relatable. Sometimes I just have to stop and stare into middle distance in the middle of filming a video, being like, okay, I do speak English.
Yeah. I mean, this is a weird thing about campaigning and just being a content creator, right? Because you're a political content creator, but it's a weird thing.
It's so weird. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but clearly you are demonstrating that you don't use scripts, and neither do I. It's just words that have to come out of head, and that can be randomly really challenging when you're trying to take abstract concepts, make it digestible, but also fit it into a minute.
Yeah.
That's can be really hard.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, I don't like using scripts. It's useful to write things down to get okay, I got to get my thoughts in order.
Yeah.
That was the whole book. It was I'm going to do that for, over the course of a year and a half. Okay. Content creation tangent aside, we're rerouting. Okay, incumbent politicians, they have advantages. Money, experience, name recognition. One of the things they do not have an advantage with is that they have to take specific positions on specific bills. You got to vote yes or no on this thing. You have to agree to XYZ compromise that maybe you didn't want to agree to. That's a part of the legislative process. And again, to play devil's advocate about this, your opponent is the majority leader in the Senate, and so he was very involved in the Millionaires Tax, making the compromises that needed to happen to get it passed. I'm going to put up a graphic on what the Millionaires Tax did, like how much money is coming in, which is about $3.7 billion, and how it's going out, which is $2.7 billion to the state operating budget, and then about $1 billion in different tax cuts and rebates. And I've got that here for you here. So I guess I have two questions. One is, what is going to be your approach as a policymaker, as a legislator? And then also, what is your opinion of this Millionaires Tax as it was passed, and what would you have done differently or not?
Yeah. I do want to address just briefly the overall the generic incumbent argument about experience and effectiveness. Just to say, experienced at what and effective at what? I think we are tired of an argument that says, I've delivered for you. I've put X millions or billions of dollars in Y fund. When we look around and say, I still am struggling to afford my life here, home ownership feels foreclosed to me, raising a family feels foreclosed to me. If we are being delivered for, where is it? So that's part of what our campaign, and I think challenges to longtime incumbents, career politicians, present a question about. But to answer your question about specifically the Millionaires Tax, absolutely, that was a historic piece of legislation that opens the door to ending some of this entrenched regressive tax code that has so hemmed in our ability to invest in our safety net services. And I do want to say it's a little too late. And this is work that could have started years ago, should have started years ago. And progressive lawmakers, people like Representative Nicole Macri, were putting what would have been a statewide jumpstart tax on the table years ago, which met obstacles in the Senate. And we see a little bit of that corporate capitulating in the Millionaires Tax, especially as it came out of the Senate. It included this $500 million corporate tax break that, when paired with the estate tax rollback, would have cost the state over $1 million in funds that could have been used to soften some of the cuts made to
the general operating budget you're talking about. Yeah.
Fortunately, the corporate tax built into the income tax was stripped out, or the corporate tax break built into that was stripped out in the House. The millionaires' income tax overall became stronger in the House, thanks again to progressive lawmakers organizing to make that happen. And I think that what it shows is how there were giveaways to corporations that didn't need to be there, that in the backroom deal making that is a feature of the type of leadership that we are challenging, we see handouts to corporations that we didn't need to make, that could have ultimately really cost our state, all for the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest individuals in Washington. It's worth noting to me that the estate tax rollback was justified by Senator Peterson in an article in the Seattle Times as something tied to a handful of conversations he had had with ultra-wealthy individuals whose estates are worth $12 million or more, who threatened to leave the state of Washington if the estate tax stayed as high as it did. And I think that demonstrates a willingness to let the ultra-wealthy have one's ear in ways that a new generation of leadership will not do, and is something that I'm committed to not doing.
I was just making a note to myself to get that Seattle Times article up in the edit.
Oh yeah, I'll send it to you.
Please, thank you. You said in there the backroom deals, like no more backroom deals. Is that possible? How do you do legislation without? I mean, ultimately, the sausage gets made how the sausage is made, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, I think I would actually reject a false choice between bureaucracy that is too difficult for everyday people to understand and must be handed down by lawmakers who are somehow more qualified for the job than we are, and and you know, policy making that, or I should say, a version of Olympia that is out of touch or incapable of getting things done. I think we've seen progressive lawmakers treat policymaking like an organizing project that brings a coalition of people into the work and win and get things done. And that the idea that this is something that the senator has said, the idea that our district lives in a bubble and doesn't understand how compromise simply needs to happen in Olympia or how policy making happens in Olympia, I think is not true.
I
can also send you the quote where he said that.
I would love that quote. Mm-hmm. I'm like I have two minds on this because I'm in agreement with you that there is a way to do things more out in the open. And then on the other hand, I was in Olympia, this is 10 years ago, but I don't think this has changed much, where there is you do have to make compromises across the caucus. But I hear you where I think the argument that you're making is, yes, there will still be compromises, but your voice would be a different perspective than Senator Peterson's in that process, because ultimately you have to get 51% of the votes, right?
Well, let me speak to what one of my objectives is here, which is demonstrating to people that government can deliver for us, can deliver affordability, can deliver a strong social safety net, can deliver safe communities. And it's a lot harder for people to believe in and trust in government as something that makes our lives easier when we don't know what's happening. We sense that things are getting more expensive even as things get worse. Things like our schools, our ability to afford healthcare, our ability to afford rent or buy a house. And I think what we are calling the question on is whether the same leadership that has overseen cuts upon cuts upon cuts to the services that we all need and rely on deserves another 4 to 8, however many years of more of that. And that we have an opportunity right now to demonstrate that government is and can be a tool for delivering materially for people and our ability to build the lives that we want to live here, where this beautiful state where we want to live them.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on, big picture, system-wide? You've talked a lot about housing, affordability. We've talked about gerrymandering. We've talked about the legislative process. Is there anything else that we should touch on?
Well, I think the one thing I would leave you with is that, well, this district, the 43rd district, is going to get a Democrat either way. That's good. Going to get a progressive Democrat either way. With maybe some arguments about who is 5 to 10 to 15 percentage points more progressive, but overall, we are going to have a Democrat representing this seat. And I think that the urgency and the stakes behind a race like this one are high. And that's because we're in a moment where politics and government broadly feels incredibly disenchanting, disempowering, discouraging, because we, given the political system that we have a party of profound corruption that exists essentially to serve billionaires' interests, and a party that is not meeting the moment to stand up to them and is still supported by those exact same corporations run by those exact same billionaires who are robbing us blind as we speak. I think more of that is not going to bring people into a future that we feel like we have any ownership over. And so that's part of why we're running, is to say government can deliver, we can shape democratic outcomes, and status quo, politics as usual leadership is not going to do that for us, is not going to make that future possible.
So you are running as a Democrat then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's the political tradition I grew up in, and to me it's important to represent a face of a party that needs to evolve, that is going to evolve whether we drag it kicking and screaming into the future or whether we step boldly into that together. And I think a future of a Democratic Party that looks more like working people than like corporate attorneys, corporate executives, property owners, ultra wealthy people, is a party that is ultimately going to bring more people into it.
Okay, final question.
Great.
If you were president and had all the power that our current president claims to have, what would you do?
Oh my gosh, where to start? I mean, I would end wars overseas. I would stop funneling money into a military apparatus that is hurting people and starving us of resources that we could be using to invest
Guns,
in
not butter.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's one thing. The second is, again, you said the power he claims to have. So I would pack the court, the Supreme Court. I mean, that has become this new legislative body, unchecked completely, that has just absolutely gutted our Voting Rights Act, absolutely gutted abortion protections, absolutely destroyed our
campaign
pro-worker
finance,
labor infrastructure. And yes, I mean, getting rid of Citizens United is a huge thing that broadly, I mean, that's a whole other thing that I want to do. Yeah, and there are steps we could take as a state to make that possible in Washington State. But yeah, I think addressing the Supreme Court's unchecked power to essentially legislate is something that I would do too.
For sure, for sure. Well, Hannah Sabio-Howell, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's been lovely.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great. See you next time.